Every year, tens of thousands of Hoosiers face eviction. At the same time, the state is spending millions of dollars to try and keep people in their homes. Our 13 Investigates reporter Sierra Putman joins us. And Sierra, you started looking at how effective these programs have been.
And we found out that some landlords just don't want to be a part of these programs. And we're learning a growing number of them are filing evictions in a way that makes the process more complicated and more expensive. Jalen Andrews is packing up his home.
Did you like this one? Yes, I did.
No family, no roommates, just him. He's moving out after getting behind on rent.
Jalen Andrews, and you're Jalen Andrews?
We first met Andrews after an eviction hearing. Court records show he started falling behind in July and struggled to pay rent on time.
Do you mind talking a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, like she said, I lost my job, became ill mentally.
With his mom by his side, Andrews told us he was hospitalized, and court documents show Community Health even stepped in to pay his rent and late fees. Andrews says he always found a way to pay, but his complex started the eviction process anyway.
When you're already dealing with mental health issues, does that help?
No, not at all.
Typically, cases like Andrews would end up in a small claims court like this.
The landlord goes first because they bear the burden of proof.
These are intentionally informal courts where everyday Hoosiers can handle disputes without an attorney.
We're on the record at 49D33.
But Andrews is one of the growing number of renters who end up here in Superior Court, where it costs more and the rules are more rigid and complex.
That right there even made me more furious.
13 Investigates found 2,234 evictions filed in Marion Superior Court last year, almost double the filings in 2022.
Why do you think that's happening now?
It's a part of the business practice just to evict the tenants as quick as they can.
Lauren Embry is a tenant advocate who helps renters facing eviction.
Many property owners, they don't want to deal with judges that are empathetic or wanting to create soft landings.
Judges like these.
What does eviction look like in your courtroom?
In a rare opportunity, 13 Investigates sat down with 7 Marion County small claims court judges.
Judge Poor mentioned that 80% of his cases are eviction cases. Will you raise your hand if you're in the same boat?
I don't know if I'm in the same boat, but close.
In 2021, the state entrusted judges with overseeing a state program that was supposed to reduce eviction cases, but it did not. The program was optional, and most landlords chose not to participate. State data show it helped in less than 1% of evictions. So, these judges started their own programs. Their initiative slowed down eviction proceedings to allow the two sides to negotiate payment and move-out plans when necessary.
We've been able to follow the spirit of what that program was supposed to do, or it was trying to do.
The courts report nearly 81% of their eviction cases were settled and 71% of the tenants stayed in their home. So no formal eviction, a red mark that can follow a person for years.
It can prevent you from finding housing in the future, from owning a house, from purchasing a car or getting that good interest rate.
We try to be fair to both sides. Sometimes it's hard when you have people in your court and you think, but for something like that happening in my life, I could be there as well.
But by the grace.
Do you have an attorney?
No.
But the Superior Court system
Plaintiff is appearing by counsel grant.
allows less grace.
You don't have an attorney with you?
Correct.
Tenant advocates say Superior Court cases pull people away from the resources at the township level, like free attorneys provided by the Tenant Advocacy Program and other groups. In September, the Marion Superior Court changed the way it schedules these eviction cases because of the increase in filings. Now it puts them before the same judge on set days. Advocates like Andy Beck, who heads TAP, applaud that change, but think most tenants shouldn't be put in this position at all.
Do you think some of the landlords are trying to avoid these small claims court judges?
That's what it looks like.
I do not know.
Elizabeth Butler is with an investment club that works with small and medium landlords. She says Superior Court cases are more expensive, but move more quickly.
If that person in tenancy isn't paying their rent, unfortunately, the landlord may not be able to pay their bill either. And there's this kind of trickle up and down effect of it.
They said they wanted a fair hearing.
Kittle Property Group owns the apartment complex that Andrews lived in. A spokesperson sent this email to 13 Investigate stating, "We have confidence that both we and the resident will get a fair trial regardless of the specific court." The company said it may file in Superior Court to avoid a backlog in small claims courts or based on the amount of rent that is past due. So, just how much did Andrews owe? $1,686, plus a $500 eviction fee, well under the small claims court cap of $10,000. The other cases, 13 Investigates observed,
$2,287.
$1,929.
were also below that cap.
$7,656.
$3,830. $2,080.
Textbook small claims facing Superior Court hurdles like higher legal fees.
Do you think that's fair for tenants?
No.
The defendant is appearing in person and by counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. It's my understanding we have an agreement.
An agreement Andrews says he tried to make before he even got to the courtroom.
We had the money.
They wouldn't take it.
They would not take it.
Now they will,
They made me not want to be here anymore.
thanks to an agreement that lets him avoid a formal eviction.
He's going to be staying with me.
I don't know where I would be at with my mom. Probably end up on the street or something, sleeping in a car.
The judges and tenant advocates we spoke with tell me the larger apartment complexes are more resistant to eviction diversion programs. We tried to talk to the Indiana Apartment Association, which represents a lot of those big complexes, but the group declined to talk to us for this story.
Does this have anything to do with what we saw during the pandemic? Because I know we reported on some property owners who weren't getting paid.
The investment group that I spoke with, they say that some owners may be taking a more aggressive action now because for a long time during the pandemic, they couldn't evict people even when they just refused to pay their rent.
Well, it's such a complex issue, really. We're going to talk more about what you learned and also the story behind how this whole investigation developed. We'll be right back. We are back talking with 13 Investigates reporter Sierra Putman. And Sierra, we're talking about a major issue facing so many people, so many families in our community, which is eviction.
And you know, this is a huge and very complicated story, as you know from some of your reporting.
Yeah, and you really focused in on how a lot of these cases are being filed in Superior Court, which can make a difference. It can be more stressful and expensive for people.
Oh, definitely. And that's what we showed in our investigation. And I started looking into this more than a year ago because I found out a state program that was supposed to help lower the number of eviction filings really wasn't working. They helped in less than 1% of the evictions happening statewide. And we wanted to get a better understanding about why that was the case.
And that really kind of puts you on the path to understand what was fully going on? Okay.
And so we talked to a lot of people, and I started off by talking to tenant advocates and attorneys that were in some of these courtrooms helping people understand what their rights were. And we spoke to Curtis Folks at the Neighborhood Christian Legal Clinic. He works with many of those people, and this is what he told me he was seeing.
I'm not sure what can be done because it's my experience so far has been that landlords aren't really willing, a lot of landlords, not all of them, but they're not really willing to help out people. It seems like evictions are filed after the first missed payment. I see it all the time. After one payment, they're here in court. And by the time it actually gets to court, they're 2 or 3 payments behind because landlords won't accept any kind of payments on a debt. So to get here, it's a tough hole to get out of.
And Indiana law provides some protections for tenants, but by far the power is in the hands of the landlords and the property owners. And I'm sure you know that based off some of the reporting you've done on this issue.
Yeah, so as part of our In Lawrence series last year, and the year before, I talked with a judge who started kind of taking steps on her own, taking the initiative at the local level to help people facing eviction. Here's what I reported back in December of 2023.
Like many others about to head into this Lawrence Township courtroom, times have gotten tough for Brittany Bittner.
After moving into a rental, her roommate moved out,
I couldn't afford the rent by myself. So
leaving her on the hook.
I tried to get my lease terminated, and I don't know if there was miscommunication or something, but now we're getting evicted.
But here, she's hoping to avoid eviction and the consequences that can follow for years. And Judge Kimberly Bacon is on the bench to help.
We look at ways to assist people to avoid evictions.
The Lawrence Township Eviction Diversion Program brings tenants and landlords together, meeting with a facilitator to negotiate a move-out date or a payment arrangement to stay.
If tenants are coming to court, landlords are coming to court, then they have the opportunity to have conversations that they might not otherwise get to have.
Indiana Legal Services is here to let tenants know what their rights are, and other advocates are on hand too to help them find financial assistance.
Information is power, and so most people don't know all of their rights or what is available.
And Judge Bacon says what began as a pilot program 2 years ago appears to be working. Court data shows since the eviction diversion program went into effect, nearly 90% of filed eviction cases were resolved without a judgment against the tenant. Today, that's the goal for tenants like Brittany.
I mean, I just didn't want my wages garnished. I didn't want them to think I was running from it, you know. I'm willing to pay my part. That's why I'm here.
So clearly some positive outcomes there. And after that story aired, 6 more judges received funding and became a part of that Marion County Eviction Diversion Initiative. And Sierra, you actually sat down in the months that followed with several judges to find out how they're using that money in their individual courtrooms to address this.
We sat down with 7 of the 9 Marion County small claims court judges. Those 7, they were all part of that initiative. And as you know, like sitting down and talking to one judge.
Just one, that's right.
That usually takes a lot of work to do. So the fact that so many of them were willing to sit down, talk to us. They gave up a lot of their time to discuss this issue. And this is a little bit about what they say that they're actually seeing in their courtrooms. It's eye-opening. Judge Poore mentioned that 80% of his cases are eviction cases. Will you raise your hand if you're in the same boat?
I don't know if I'm in the same boat, but close.
It is the bulk of my docket.
A lot of people don't use the diversion program in our court, but what they do is that we work out payment plans, we work out other ways to allow them to stay in the property or catch up, or give them a reasonable time to vacate the real estate if they cannot.
With a show of hands, and just raise your hand if you also use payment plans in your courtroom. That's most of you.
I view a payment plan as giving a person an opportunity to catch up, and then hopefully their landlord will be agreeable to let them stay. I can't make the landlord waive their rights under the lease agreement. And my experience is that 95% of the time, if people get caught up in a reasonable amount of time, the landlord is glad to keep them, because I think part of being a successful landlord is having good tenants.
Then we are giving the litigants an opportunity to continue to work things out without waiver of either side's rights.
There's obviously a bigger problem.
What's the bigger problem?
Well, the bigger problem is the economy, the way people are living. We can do what we can do with the assets and the resources we're giving. But it's what's putting these people in these positions to where they can't pay their rent. That's the bigger problem.
And that's not necessarily something that a pre-eviction program can help.
No, that's the worst thing in the world, to have to look at somebody and say, get out of your house.
Well, we exist to give the everyday person on the street a chance to come in and talk to us as judges without an attorney. And we listen. They get a lawsuit filed against them in Superior Court. They get a summons that says if you don't answer in 20 or 23 days, depending on how it's served, you're going to be defaulted. I mean, most people, if they could afford an attorney, they probably wouldn't be behind in their rent. They probably wouldn't be behind in their bills. That's a problem. That goes way beyond what we're talking about today, but that's a problem that needs to be dealt with, because the people are not getting a chance to see us.
And, you know, looking back, that last statement really foreshadowed the story we would eventually tell with our latest investigation.
And as those judges said, you know, they don't just see the stats. A lot of us read the stats, we see the numbers, but they see the faces of the people facing eviction, the faces of the landlords every day. And you just got an update on how those programs went last year.
They say they see the faces because they also live in those communities. And they shared some of that preliminary data with me. These are just a few of the stats that they shared.
Okay.
They said based off the questionnaires they sent out, 74% of the people facing eviction they're dealing with are female, 77% are Black, and this is the one that really stuck with me. 80% of the tenants have a child in that home. That's one or more children. So it's not just individual people, we're talking about whole families impacted.
So I know people are going to have a couple of questions. Are most of the people facing evictions working? Do they have a regular job that they're working every day?
They are working. And sometimes I feel like we think, oh, if you get in this place, you're not working. 80% of the folks that these judges and their courts surveyed say that they are working 31 or more hours a week. And most people say if they fell behind and they're in this situation where they can't pay rent, it's because of a lot of different things. For a lot of people, it's because their hours were reduced, or maybe they lost a job.
And so the other question is this going to continue in Marion County? Will it continue? And who pays for these? Who pays for these programs?
Will it continue? Right now, it's continuing right now. They have funding up until the end of June. The question is, will it continue after that? They are waiting to find out. They need about $750,000 to make sure they can continue with this program through the rest of 2025. And after that, they need about $1.5 million a year. And you're talking about who's paying for it.
Yeah.
They'll take money wherever they can get it, basically. Obviously, if it's legal. We're talking about courts here.
Right.
A lot of these programs were started either with federal funds. They had funding from different grant programs through like legal services and other groups. And so now they're trying to figure out if there's more grants they can apply for, and whether or not some local governments may help them with these cases.
Okay, well, I know from my own reporting, these courts can only really do so much on their own, at least without financial help and guidance from lawmakers as well.
And they talked about that.
I guess one way to look at it is if the people in the legislature, after watching these interviews, thinks that things could be done better, they can give us direction. They have the power and authority to do that.
Now, with everything we've discussed, you understand it's forcing the judiciary into an uncomfortable area, almost social services type things. That's tough. We're trying to do the best we can and not step over those lines of our judicial canons. We have to be very careful about that.
Great conversation. I still can't believe you got all those judges in one room at the same time to talk about this. But I know, talking to the tenant advocates and judges wasn't enough.
No, we wanted to talk to the people at the heart of this.
Yeah.
And who are those people? Those are the landlords. Those are the actual people facing eviction. And this is where we hit a bit of a roadblock. We had some difficulty finding some people who were willing to really open up and let us into their homes and talk about why they were facing eviction. Some people would talk to us, like this woman you're about to see, but she and many other folks we reached out to, they asked that we did not share their full name or, in this case, hide their face. This is a woman we met in Washington Township.
What happened? You just fall behind. Like, you work as much as you can, and then it's like, okay, do I have the money? I have it, but then things happen. I had to get a new car, so that's like, yeah, it's a struggle, but I'm making it.
Strength there and courage to keep going, but also to talk to you, because talking about it, this issue is kind of tough for some people, very tough for some people.
And if you think about how this can impact them long term, you understand why. A lot of people are worried if their full name gets out there, if their face gets out there, future landlords may not want to rent to them. And so that was one of the hurdles we had when telling the story, finding that right family willing to talk to us and allow us into their home and life. But it turned out that what felt like a hurdle at some points was kind of a blessing because later on I overheard you talking about a tip that you received.
Yeah, I got a tip from somebody that more of these evictions were being filed in Superior Court, and that tipster said that the problem with that is it's more stressful and it's more expensive for the people going through the process.
And that tip actually led us to start looking outside of just the small claims courts, and we were lucky enough that the judge who was overseeing a lot of these evictions in Superior Court let us bring our cameras in, and so we were able to show how more intense the eviction process was. And it turns out it was more intense for the tenants, but also for some of these property owners.
And I'll bet you that made you want to hear from the landlords even more.
And that was another one of the issues, trying to get some people wanting to talk about this, specifically some of the larger companies that represent different groups. We did finally get a hold of Elizabeth Butler with the Sharia Club, or Central Indiana Real Estate Investors Association. She opened up and she helped us get the perspective of those small and medium business owners about why they actually file these evictions.
Both the property owner and the resident have this responsibility to one another. One is to provide the housing, one is to pay the rent. If that person in tenancy isn't paying their rent, unfortunately, the landlord may not be able to pay their bill either. And there's this kind of trickle up and down effect of it. I think when someone gets a month behind, unfortunately, it's become kind of a common practice that even in Indiana, it's day 10. As of your rent is due the 1st, it is latest of the 6th, and you get a 10-day notice telling you that we're going to file eviction against you because that's the law here. So it is always encouraged that if you have an obligation with someone contractually that they stay in your property and pay rents for that property, that you want to work with them as much as you possibly can. When that situation becomes untenable in that there is no communication from either side of that transaction, and when there is a failure to be able to get into compliance with those contractual obligations, that's when it leads to that point of being evicted.
It looks like the smaller rental property owners, they're more willing to participate in these eviction diversion programs, and the larger properties, they're not willing to do that. Why do you think that is?
For a large part of it, those local, it's like smaller entities, smaller LLCs that have these properties, of course, are more in your local market. It's people who live here, work here, and it is part of that community basis where the dollars that I as a property owner deploy go directly back to Indianapolis. I employ people who take care of our properties, and we have people who manage the properties, those kinds of things. Whereas that larger scale corporate investor is how we kind of term them. The corporate investor is often not housed here, isn't even in the Midwest, and so they are hiring that second tier, that person in between, that intermediary property manager, and it is part of their business plan that for their client, they represent only their interest and as quickly and efficiently as they possibly can, because that is just how businesses run, unfortunately.
And that was actually the last interview that we did, and we made these pivots while reporting because the eviction landscape keeps changing, and we thought it was just really important for us to show how complicated the story is, and so viewers really understand what's happening in this space that's impacting our neighbors.
Wow, what a journey. I love how you talked with really all the sides, because there are so many different voices and pieces to this difficult puzzle. And I always think it's interesting how, you start working on a story and think it's going to be one thing, and then it can change on a dime.
Yes, and that's journalism. That's how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to pull those threads until we get to the heart of the story, and we're able to let you all at home better understand these complicated issues that's impacting our community.
Yeah.
So
you pursue it, you follow it wherever it goes. Great work. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and check out more of our 13 Investigates reports right here on WTHR+.